I was driving alone on a remote highway, the night growing deeper, and the drowsiness slowly creeping in. For safety, I decided to stop and find a place to rest for the night. Finally, I saw an old, run-down motel on the side of the road. The exterior looked shabby, but I didn't have much choice at the moment. I parked my car in the lot and walked towards the reception. The front desk was a small, dimly lit room with an old man sitting behind the counter, staring at an outdated TV. He didn't even glance at me, only muttering the room rate in a flat tone. I paid, got the room key, a rusty old metal one instead of the usual card, and headed to my room. Pushing open the creaky door, a musty smell hit me instantly. The room was small, the carpet was stained, and the bed looked worn out, but all I needed was a place to sleep. When I tried to lock the door, I found the lock wasn't working properly. After a bit of struggle, I finally managed to secure it. I turned off the lights and laid down on the bed. The mattress groaned under my weight, and the room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere almost suffocating. Just as I was about to fall asleep, a sudden loud knock came from the window. I jolted awake, my heart racing, and saw a blurry figure standing outside. He spoke in a raspy voice, "Please help me, I'm hurt, let me in." Something felt wrong about the way he was pleading. I didn't respond, pretending not to hear, but my unease grew stronger. The man continued begging, his voice sounding more desperate. I was certain this was a trap, no way was I opening that door. After what felt like an eternity, the knocking stopped, and the silence returned. I cautiously checked the door lock again to ensure no one could enter. I went back to bed, trying to calm my nerves and sleep. Not long after, I drifted off, but a strange noise began to creep into my dream, a soft clicking that grew louder and louder until it pulled me from sleep. When I woke, I noticed the room had become cold, and the blanket had slipped off me. As I reached down to pull it back over, I froze. At the foot of my bed stood a tall, dark figure, watching me. My mind went blank, and my body stiffened with fear. Before I could scream, the figure whispered, "Don't move, don't make a sound. I won't hurt you." His voice was calm but menacing. He asked, "Where's your wallet?" Terrified, I pointed to my jacket pocket on the floor. He quietly moved towards it, rummaging through the pockets until he found the wallet. He asked if I had anything else on me. "I'm just on a road trip," I stammered. Without another word, he turned and left. I scrambled out of bed to lock the door, once again struggling with the stubborn lock. My hands trembled as I finally secured it. I immediately called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. Later, the front desk clerk showed me security footage, but the intruder had been wearing a mask and hat, concealing his identity. I got my money back and left. Luckily, I didn't have much cash, and I canceled all my cards. That night, I slept in my car, vowing never to stop at a sketchy motel again. My father and I had been driving for hours, originally planning to reach our destination by dusk, but things didn't go as planned. As darkness fell, we decided to find a place to spend the night. While driving down a deserted road, we spotted an old, worn-out motel in the distance, with a flickering vacancy sign hanging outside. The surroundings were eerily quiet, with only the sound of wind rustling through the dry branches. We entered the lobby, where an elderly woman sat behind the front desk. She gave us a mechanical smile, but there was something unsettling in her eyes. Her voice was raspy, as if something was lodged in her throat. "Only one room left," she said. "Do you still want to stay?" My father and I exchanged a glance. Though I felt uneasy, our exhaustion pushed us to stay. The room was old, with a musty smell of dampness in the air. Faded wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the furniture was covered in a thin layer of dust. The dim light barely illuminated the space, casting long shadows on the walls. After unpacking a few things, we decided to get some rest, hoping to leave early the next day. Late at night, I was suddenly awakened by a low, muffled sound, like footsteps echoing down the hallway. I glanced at the clock to 17 a.m. I lay still, trying to listen carefully. The footsteps grew louder, eventually stopping right outside our door. Then, the handle of the door began to rattle gently. I froze in place, my heart racing as I stared at the door, terrified of what might be on the other side. I nudged my father awake, and he, too, seemed to sense something was wrong. The rattling suddenly stopped, but what followed was even more disturbing. Faint whispers, low and indistinct, as if someone or something was murmuring just outside. A chill ran down my spine. My hands were trembling, my body paralyzed with fear. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The whispers faded, and silence returned, but just when I thought it was over, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the nightstand beside our bed. My father put a finger to his lips, signaling for me to stay quiet. I lay there, heart pounding, as the scratching sound grew louder, as if something was moving beneath the bed. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped out of bed, hurriedly packing our belongings. My father, equally unnerved, quickly followed suit. Without saying a word, we left the room key on the bed and quietly slipped out of the room. We made our way to the truck, trying not to make any noise as we started the engine. It was 2:32 a.m. when we sped off, leaving the motel far behind. We didn't speak the entire drive, the terrifying events still fresh in our minds. We never looked back, and I swore to myself I would never step foot in that motel again. My girlfriend and I had just gotten into a huge argument during our weekend trip. I couldn't stand being in the same room with her that night, so I decided to leave. Instead of paying for another expensive hotel room, I drove down the road and found a cheap, run-down motel. It was the kind of place you wouldn't think twice about, but it had a room for $50, and that was good enough for me. The motel looked old, with flickering neon lights outside and an empty parking lot. I checked in, got my key, and walked to my room. As I passed by the room next to mine, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. The blue glow of a TV lit up the inside, but I couldn't see anyone. I didn't want to seem like I was prying, so I kept walking. Inside my room, everything felt normal at first. The decor was outdated, with a tacky floral bedspread, but it was a place to stay for the night. I wasn't tired yet, so I lay down on the bed, turned on the TV, and scrolled through my phone. After a while, I heard a strange noise. At first, I thought it was coming from the TV, but when I turned it off, the sound continued. It was a muffled, rhythmic thumping, like something heavy hitting the wall. I sat up, trying to figure out where it was coming from. That's when I realized it was coming from the room next door. The noise got louder, and it was clear now that someone was pounding on the wall, just on the other side of mine. My heart started racing. I wasn't sure if it was a fight or something else, but I felt the need to check it out. I left my room and walked to the door of the room next door. The door was still slightly open, and the TV was still on, casting that same eerie blue glow. I knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay, but no one answered. I pushed the door open a bit more and called out, but the room was completely empty. There was no sign of anyone inside, and the bathroom door was open, revealing only darkness. I took a few steps into the room, feeling uneasy. The only thing I could hear was the low hum of the TV, which was showing nothing but a blank blue screen. That's when I noticed a small, sticky note stuck to the screen. There were only 3 words written on it: check under the bed. I froze. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I didn't want to check under the bed. The whole situation felt wrong, like I had walked into something I shouldn't have. Panic set in, and I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me. Back in my room, I locked the door and chained it, my hands shaking. I texted my girlfriend, telling her what had just happened, and she called me immediately. I started telling her the story over the phone, but before I could finish, there was another loud bang, this time on the wall right next to my bed. She heard it too, through the phone, and told me to get out of there. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my things and ran to the motel's front desk, explaining to the clerk what had happened. I insisted that someone check the room, but he just gave me a strange look and said there was no one staying in the room next to mine. I demanded that he come with me to check it out. He reluctantly agreed, grabbing a key and leading me back to the room. When he opened the door, the room was completely dark. The TV was off, and the sticky note was gone. He checked under the bed, but it was empty. There was no one there. He refused to give me a refund, but I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to leave. I went back to my car, got my things, and drove back to my girlfriend. That night, for the first time in a while, I was relieved to be back in the same room with her. I don't know what I experienced in that motel room, but I'm glad I didn't find out what was under the bed.